Hey everyone, today I wanted to consider what would happen to the characters had the entity never intervened, interacted, or taken them. If the entity was never there, what would their fate be? Trapper is well known for the massacre he caused, said to be one of the worst in modern human history. It's possible he could have escaped after causing the cave-in from the mines, running away and living in the woods or something. It's also very possible that without the entity he just gets caught. This seems like the likely outcome, with many likely wanting his capture. Going even further back, it's possible without the entity's intervention with both Evan and his father, that he never even reaches this state of being the Trapper, but instead helps the Macmillan workers, and manages to get away from his father before too much damage is done, potentially even becoming an artist of some kind, managing to take a different path without his father's corruption. Wraith leaves off his law after just killing his boss Azarov. He runs away after this, but with the entity not taking him, it means he either goes on the run or is caught. Either is relatively possible. I think particularly with the Wreckers Yard said to be in a very secluded location, it's unlikely anyone gets there quickly. Philip is another character though where reasonably without entity intervention, it's possible a lot less negative stuff happens. As much that does seems to potentially be caused by the entity. Therefore it's probable Philip doesn't kill the soldiers in his tome lore, and it's further possible that when he moves to the US, he doesn't turn a blind eye to Azarov, but either exposes him or simply seeks employment elsewhere, living a normal life. Billy was left to roam free on Coldwind Farm after he had killed his parents and the chief and his deputies. He likely remains here pillaging the land and causing a lot of destruction, attacking anyone who came onto the farm. From here he probably either is shot after attempting to attack someone, or he's eventually captured by police and is imprisoned. Nurse was being transported to a hospital, and it's actually possible she doesn't get imprisoned in the same way as some of the others here, but instead be returned to an asylum herself, only this time as a patient. Without the entity's intervention, the ambulance transporting her wouldn't have crashed, meaning she would get to the hospital, and from there, likely an asylum or prison. The entity does seem to be present during her days at Crotus Pren, so like some of the others, it's also possible she doesn't get to the state she does when the entity isn't there. Maybe there's a chance she isn't swayed by the broken woman in her tome lore, and instead just remains a worker at the asylum, or maybe moves on, realizing the stress to her health. Myers depends on the chronology you choose to follow from the films. Maybe he continues on his rampage during Halloween night, maybe he gets captured and locked up. It's really up for debate, and any one of the sequels could technically happen or be canon. The entity doesn't interfere with his story, so it doesn't change much here, only him getting taken. Hag simply would have died. She's saved by the entity originally and wouldn't have broken out her chains had she not been. With her final strength, she carves a symbol that summons it. With the entity not appearing, it means she falls victim to her captors, likely becoming a cautionary tale to the nearby village she grew up in. Doctor, I can imagine, is probably silenced by the CIA. After all, he did some pretty messed up stuff, and after his outright massacre, they probably weren't happy about that. Either he was more publicly arrested, I would say, and locked up for his massacre of the Larry's patients and other staff, or he was silently taken care of by the CIA. Huntress more than likely remains in the woods and continues surviving, pillaging and protecting her land. She defeated squadrons of soldiers, so it's highly probable that she simply manages to defend her land and her cabin until she grows too old to do so. She likely becomes a legend of the Red Forest, and it becomes a dangerous place to enter. Bubba kind of depends on what chronology you go with for TCM. Any one of those could technically happen. Either Bubba and the family get away with it and move on or something, or maybe Bubba and his family are arrested and caught. Potentially even the chainsaw wound he gets at the end of the first film could prove fatal. Freddy likely returns. This is what happens just before he and Quentin are taken in the DVD canon, is he came back after initially being defeated and set to haunt Quentin and Nancy again. Without the entity's intervention here, he likely kills Quentin, if Quentin isn't also taken. Then probably the same for Nancy and the remaining Badham kids. It's pretty terrifying and messed up, but that's probably what happens and is suggested at the end of the 2010 film. Pig was dying in the moment she was taken, so she's just going to bleed out like she she would have without the entity. Clown had become very sloppy at the end of his lore, and was fleeing in his caravan after someone he captured escaped. He'd been on the run for a while, and inevitably with this sloppiness would have been caught, and more than likely imprisoned. Spirit, I believe, would just be dead at the hands of her father. After all, from what the lore suggests, Rin is an entity created on Ryo, and not an actual Onryo. Therefore, when she is attacked, she probably just dies without the entity's intervention and extension of a deal being made between the two for revenge. There's maybe a chance she could become an actual Onryo without the entity's intervention. After all, magic in this universe is real, but that's really just speculation. There is heavy suggestion too that Rin's father was actually being whispered to by the entity. This means there's further a chance that had there been no entity, sure, maybe her father would still be stressed and would have lost the estate and his job, but he wouldn't have gone so far as to kill both Rin and her mother, with them simply adapting and taking on a smaller home and humbler life as a family. It's likely even that Rin and her mother would have just left him, with them already being fearful of their father. Legion is a case where all four of them would likely be punished for the murder of the store clerk, with the body being very quickly uncovered up Mount Ormond. If they weren't taken, they would quite quickly be found and blamed. It's somewhat unclear if they all literally took part with using the knife and such, but regardless, they're all accomplices, meaning they're probably all going to be imprisoned for at least a decade or two. Plague was in a very dire state and was going to die of the plague had the entity not taken her. She was in a cave with some of her most loyal followers and was slowly being consumed by the sickness. With no entity, this is where her story ends. Going further back though, there's a chance Adiris never even gets this far. In her ultimatum with Haban, where she's asked to leave Babylon with him, leaving their false religion behind, she hears the entity's whisper, and so stays and kills him. Without that whisper though, she likely would have left with her mentor Haban, and lived an entirely different life without faith, and without the entity. Ghostface had just revealed himself as the Ghostface, and was about to leave Roseville. Now, part of me wants to say that he'd likely just continue on with what he's doing and wouldn't get caught, but at the same time, people know his face now, and there's only so long he can last in a new town. Maybe he can keep it up for a while longer, but ultimately, I think he gets caught without the entity's intervention. Demogorgon isn't particularly clear because we aren't entirely sure, I think, which Demogorgon it is. If it's the one from the first season of the show, then the fate is 11 destroys it. If it's from season 3, then it returns to being locked up and is destroyed later by the characters. If it's just another random one from the Upside Down, then it simply returns to where it was and joins in with the Mind Flayer and Vecna's plans to invade Hawkins. Oni is bleeding out in a stone mill when the entity's fog consumes him, so without that he draws his final breath there and just dies. Maybe there's a chance, a bit like Spirit, that he returns as an actual Oni, but that's purely guesswork. Deathslinger likely would have either been imprisoned again or maybe even sentenced to death, due to inciting a prison riot and causing a lot of death and mayhem after he stormed Hellshire Penitentiary. Him and the Hellshire gang are likely all put to death or spend the rest of their days locked up. It's also possible they go on the run with considerably high bounties on their own heads, either being slain by a bounty hunter or caught and imprisoned. Due to Caleb's solemnness at the end of his lore though, I lean more toward him just giving himself up. Executioner was preparing for something called the Long Rest when the entity contacted him. Without the entity's intervention therefore, we can assume he goes into the Long Rest, which is presumably him just lying dormant until he's needed. Blight is a case where he probably just dies in the cave on Dire Island. Talbot summons the entity in its lore by carving symbols into a cave wall. If this still happens, but alternately he isn't taken, then Talbot is likely left pretty distraught, after sacrificing everything really to get to the realm and discover this new dimension, only to be turned away in his last moments. He was already in a pretty sorry physical state, and so likely dies. Even without the entity's intervention, he still probably tries to seek its realm, or another realm. After all, he was seeking other dimensions. Not specifically the entities, but he probably does follow the same path. Twins would likely both be dead. Victor was already dead for quite a while before Charlotte was taken. Victor in the realm, in fact, is more than likely an entity creation used to manipulate Charlotte. Charlotte Charlotte, when she was taken, was freezing in the cold of winter aside a fire. Without the entity's sudden appearance, she would have simply died from the cold. Trickster is more than likely just arrested after making his big scene at Mighty One Studios. If Yunjin also isn't taken, then he kills her too, along with the other executives. It's probably extremely big news with him being a huge K-pop star. His other murders are probably uncovered and the hidden screams in his music revealed. Nemesis would continue to chase Jill throughout Raccoon City. If Jill got taken and he hadn't, it probably wouldn't matter. Either way, he'd probably remain in the city and be destroyed when the nuke hits it at the end of Resident Evil 3. He'd probably still be tasked to seek stars, even if Jill was gone. Cenobite just returns to what he was doing, being a Cenobite. The realm seems to almost be like a fun vacation for him, so if the box had never appeared in the realm, he would simply go back to what he's doing before. He'd probably follow the events of the Hellraiser films. Artist's life is entirely changed. It's suggested that the death of her brother Matthias is the entity's doing. With it not being there, she never goes to the bridge, the crows never save her, and she ultimately would probably not be an artist even, drawing on those dark thoughts. It's possible she would have run away with her brother and started a new life somewhere, away from their abusive father. The entity's presence truly changes the whole course of her life. Sadako, without the entity saving her from the well, would simply remain down it. She would continue to curse the cabin and tapes, and likely cause a lot of mayhem, her rage ever present and everlasting. Dredge will simply continue on back on Earth. It disappeared into the shadows before, and so now remains there until it has more to consume. Not a good thing for the world, but that's probably what happens. The Dredge continues on, and likely consumes more communities such as the Garden of Joy one. Out of the realm, it seems much more powerful too, which is definitely concerning. The extent to which this power could grow is unclear, but likely quite considerable. Wesker ultimately would have died at the hands of Chris and Shiva after falling into a volcano. Yup, Resident Evil 5 is weird. He'd attempt his Ouroboros plan for complete global saturation, but would ultimately fail and be stopped by them both, dying in the process. Knight, it's pretty up in the air to be honest. Him and the Guardia Campania are facing down what's essentially an army of people. Despite this, Knight seems pretty confident he can win still. The lore does suggest, however, that the entity intervened, stating others believed something otherworldly protected them, in relation to the Knight and the guards. It's therefore my belief that without this intervention, they would have died to the army. Skull Merchant likely would have just continued on with what she was doing. It was only the presence of Talita and Renato which would have disturbed her otherwise normal plan on taking down a CEO. If they hadn't been taken also, then maybe there's a problem and she gets exposed. Otherwise, she continues doing her thing, doing hostile takeovers and likely developing her technology and increasing her wealth more. Singularity is kind of a scary case because with it surviving Gabriel's initial attack and chasing him down, if he wasn't taken, then he would remain on the planet of Devaka, and likely grow more powerful, to the point where it could be a major danger to humanity. Gabriel, after all, had called in a distress call. If that's ever answered, then Hux could cause some real damage to, like, humanity as a whole. Xenomorph was taken just after it was ejected into space from the airlock by Ripley. If the entity hadn't taken it in this instance, then it would have just suffocated in space. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, and let me know your own thoughts on what you think would happen down below. Thanks, and goodbye.